Intro. Mr. Intro Automatic from Intro Industries is here. I'm ready to help you, ma'am. What can I do for you today? What are you looking for in an intro? Don't mind me. These are personal notes for the business log.
Well, I guess we'd just like an intro that is concise, to the point, and
Concise,
really...
yes, concise. So 35, 40 minutes.
No, maybe 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Hold on here. I don't think I have my 30-second intro wrench. I do have the shoehorn looking thing. I do have all the tools for a 27-minute intro. So it's going to have to be that. That sounds concise in my book.
Okay.
Anything else you want to add? Is this kind of what you're looking for?
No.
Okay. Hold on. I got it. Let me just try something else here. This one. I drew this morning. Is that kind of what's up in your mind?
That's an ice cream cone that says over it.
Yeah, that's good intro material right there.
Sure, we can work with that.
Well, let me try one more thing. Just give me a second here. If you didn't like the last one, I have one more idea I think you're going to love. This is episode 17. Here we go.
Perfect.
All right, cool. My work's done here. I'll see you later.
Ride across this country into the starlight. 12,000 miles, turn back, do it again. No destination, it's just a journey. You were my lover and friend.
This is episode 17. We are doing the propane, we are doing the closet doors, the headboard, and finishing up that little cubby on the back of the closet.
I, for one, am so excited to hear about it, Savannah, so fire it away.
First up this week is our propane system. And you may be asking why we even choose to put propane in our builds at all. We've talked about this before in our build videos, but we like to mention it again, and that is diversifying your systems. You don't want to overly rely on one power source for all of your essentials in the build. You don't want everything connected to propane or everything connected to electricity, because if something goes down, you lose every essential part in your build. So we like to kind of break them up between electric and propane, and also we just love that Dickinson heater, and that is a propane heater.
Our goal with these builds has always been to make them fully off-grid capable, meaning you don't need to rush to go plug in or rush to go fill up your systems. You can be out off-grid for 2-3 weeks at a time. The only thing you ever need to go get is water. This is one of those system projects that you may take time to install because there are different components of it and you have to be ready for each part of it. So we've been preparing this for a while. We actually installed the tank quite a while back. Now this is a horizontal undermount style tank that is made specifically for an application such as an RV camper. You're going to need to get that kind of tank if you want to do this style. Getting a barbecue tank and turning it sideways, it won't work. They're not meant to work that way. Our first step in this process was getting underneath the vehicle, seeing what space we had to work with, and figuring out what size tank would fit there. We wanted to go with the biggest tank that would fit both in the space front to back, but also another big consideration is how high off the ground. Fortunately, with the Unicell, the floor is very high, so we're able to get this really big 20-gallon tank, and it's still above the bottom of the fiberglass, so we know it's safe there. It's not hanging too low to the ground.
We have this same 20-gallon undermount style propane tank on the bus that we live in. We have to fill this tank maybe 3 to 4 times a year, basically once a season. When we had our van, we had an 8-gallon tank undermounted underneath the van, and we'd have to fill that about once a month. So it's really nice to not have to find propane fill stations all the time, and we think it was worth it to go for the bigger tank because this is a really big tank to have on a build of this size.
After making our measurements, we cut horizontal support pieces and then punched holes in for bolts so we can mount the tank to those.
We then took the Unicell from our shop over to my dad's shop so that he could weld in these support pieces. This is really, really thick metal, and with having to weld it to the frame of the Unicell, my tiny little welder in our shop just was not capable of that. So thank you to him for getting underneath the vehicle and welding over his head, which is a miserable experience most of the time. But we got both of those support pieces welded right onto the frame so so that we can mount that tank to those pieces and it is not going anywhere. Anytime you're using steel, it definitely has to be painted so that it won't rust. And we started with the black paint and then we ran out of black paint, so we had to use another can of white paint. So one of these supports is black and one is white, but they're now protected and they won't rust.
I thought that was an aesthetic style choice. I thought you were going for like a zebra effect or something.
It was deliberate.
Next very fun step was getting the tank underneath there and holding it in place to put the bolts through. I wish I could have strapped that up there. That was pretty awkward, but I didn't have anything to strap it to.
You kind of bench pressed it up onto the frame and I stuck the bolts through.
I'd probably recommend getting like a jack or something to hold that in place. Maybe not do what I did, but I was able to, press it up and let Savannah put the bolts in. So it was safe because I had the tank securely while she handled the bolts.
Now that the tank was mounted, you need a way to access the tank so that you can actually fill it. We did this by cutting another hole in the skirt of the Unicell and making a little door that will go over the hole so that you can cover it. It looks nice aesthetically, but it's really easy to open that door and fill the tank.
So keep it up now. So keep it up. So keep it up with me. I need to move. I need to feel the beat. Don't be a fool. You wanna hang with me. Life isn't easy. You gotta roll the dice. You wanna change. You're in the paradise. So bring it on if you wanna hang with me. You know I know we kick it like no one else. We kick it like no one else. Listen now, there ain't nothing like this. You know I know we kick it like no one else.
In this system, we have two locations we'll be running propane to. First is our Dickinson marine heater. The other is our stove and oven combination. We don't have a propane water heater in this build, so we only need 2 split-offs and not 3. Once we are able to determine the location of the appliances within the vehicle, we're able to drill a hole through the floor so we could run the copper line up through there. This can be tough to do until you actually built your walls or your cabinet to know exactly where that's going to be. So if you don't have it super detailed planned out, I would wait until your heater is in place on the wall and your stove/oven is in the cabinet where it's going to be permanently. That way you can get the hole in the exact spot so you don't have to drill multiple holes or try to bend the propane line in some funky way to reach it.
If you've been watching our channel for a while, you know that we love this Dickinson marine heater. We've installed both the P9000 and the P12000 over the years. It has a fireplace front on it, which adds a ton of ambiance. Don't even get me started on Christmas time with this heater in our bus. We absolutely love it. And the fact that it has the double wall chimney that goes up through the roof means that it doesn't release any moisture into the bus. We get a lot of questions about that. This is not like a Mr. Buddy heater. This has a chimney, so it's really dry heat that's coming out. This chimney is phenomenal. We recommend it to anyone that wants a propane heater with that little bit of ambiance. One thing we do want to mention, since we did our build last summer, Dickinson has released new guidelines about how to set up the regulators within the propane system to accommodate that heater. They now say in the manual that the heater should have its own separate regulator, and on their website they have guidelines. They show all the parts and pieces that you can even buy from them.
Exactly. So instead of installing a 2-stage regulator right on the propane tank as we had in the past, we will be taking a line directly off of the propane tank, splitting it 2 ways, one for the stove, one for the heater, and after we split it, there'll be shut-off valves and then a regulator for each individual appliance. For whatever reason, the Dickinson heater really wants to be on its own regulator. It doesn't want to share a 2-stage regulator with any other appliance, so this is exactly how we installed it. Coming off the tank, we ran a rubber hose and then we split it with a T flare fitting in 2 directions. One heading towards the oven and the stove, and one heading towards the heater. Off of the split, there is a shutoff valve, then the regulator, then the copper line that runs directly to the appliance. We used the flare tool to make the fittings on the end so we could connect them both to the appliances and back to the propane source at the tank. After the lines were all connected, the last step was to put them in some conduit just to protect them since they are underneath the vehicle. To secure them in place, I just used some wire clamps here. That way when you're driving, they can't shake or move around at all. Once all this was fully installed, there is one more step, and that's testing for leaks. Make sure everything is tightened down. Now with the flare fittings, you don't want to over tighten them originally because you could eventually damage that line. So it's good to tighten them hand tight, crank them like a quarter, then actually turn it on. Now there's no propane in this tank and the vehicle is not on the road, so I didn't want to drive it to get it filled. So I pulled our bus up next to it and ran the rubber hose over connected to our tank. That way I could test to see if there was any leaks.
Our bus gave a little donation to the Unicell of propane.
They're testing some stuff.
What's going on here?
Oh, I brought my portable propane tank to do a test since this one's empty and this vehicle's not on the road to go fill it. Just brought this nice, convenient, small portable propane tank to give it a test.
This is a real tight spot you got here.
Yeah, I gotta get out of here. Once we had it connected to the propane tank, we turned it on and there was a few leaks. This isn't uncommon. Like I said, you really don't want to over tighten these fittings in the first place. So it's kind of good to get them on and see, this one is just leaking a little bit. Tighten it down. Hopefully that fixes your problem. If everything is made correctly, it should, and you should be able to move on. Great way of testing this, of course, is doing the sudsy water. So it's going to bubble up and show you which fittings are leaking. You can kind of tell without that because you can hear it and you can smell it, but that really indicates exactly where on that fitting it's leaking.
Overall, this is a pretty simple propane system. Once the tank is mounted underneath the vehicle, we only had 2 locations to run propane to, and they were fairly close to where the tank was mounted. We have the heater and the oven/stove. And now that Dickinson has released these guidelines, there's a nice photo right in the manual of the Dickinson that you can follow. They link all the different components. So we just followed their guidelines, connected it back to the tank, and the propane system was finished. Before we could actually fire up the Dickinson P12000 and make sure that it's working properly, we had to finish its installation. That chimney was still not permanently connected. A long while back, we drilled the hole for the chimney to make sure that our solar setup on the roof did not interfere with the deck cap. So that hole has been there for a long time. We just had to actually put the chimney up through it and trim it to size.
This is what's called a direct vent chimney. So it's 2 chimneys. First is the internal, which is the actual exhaust from the heater leaving the vehicle, and the outer chimney is pulling fresh air into the heater.
Once we did that, the deck cap could be installed and sealed up on the roof. Now it is watertight, there'll be no leaks from the chimney, and all of that is good to go.
This heart, it doesn't want me. I better tell the tale. There's a hole in my heart where you end, and that's a start. Now it goes on and on, on and on. Without you.
One last thing we wanted to mention is this little collar that we made for the shelf that the chimney runs up through. We typically run this chimney up through either a cabinet or a shelf, and we do like to protect that wood just for peace of mind. So we made a little collar that will go into the hole in the shelf, run the chimney through it, and now there's no risk that it could ever just be resting on that plywood.
Yeah, it's just one more added level of safety. And honestly, it is a huge aesthetic upgrade to put that collar on there. It looks a lot better than just the exposed wood.
And that's a start. Now it goes on and on. On and on. Without you.
The last thing to do here was give them a test. Light the heater and light the stove.
It's always satisfying when you finish a project and everything actually works. So after we had eliminated any of the leaks, we fired up the heater and it worked right away. And seeing that flame in there and feeling that warmth come off, it's very exciting. We know how nice it feels in the winter to have that ambiance of the light. Excited to see that working.
'Cause there's a hole in your heart where I'm in, and that's a start. Now it goes on and on.
The next project up this week is the headboard. Now, this project does nothing but look good. It's purely aesthetic, it's purely a design choice, and it's so much fun to make this headboard in every single build. For this build, we decided to do the same headboard that we did in last summer's shuttle bus build. That's because I love this headboard. It's very simple, it's very open, but it's a vertical design that adds a lot of height to the space. It makes it feel a lot taller than it is. And in a vehicle like the Unicell that already has a pretty unique amount of headroom, it just really makes it feel so spacious. So I started work on the design by cutting all the pieces and the backer board. There was no reason to use anything heavier than cabinet grade 1/4 inch ply, so that was the first piece that got screwed onto the wall.
I need you to take them, and I don't wanna wait all night. I'm coming alive, and my senses are a little demented. Can this be right?
Then I had to go through and attach each of these vertical pieces to the wall, making sure that they were square to both the cabinet and the bed so that they didn't look like they were on an angle, but also each one is cut specifically to meet the one above it or to the side of it. So it's a very specific design, and keeping all of them straight and in the right place was a bit of a challenge. But I worked left to right, got them all on the wall, and made sure that they looked good when you stepped back and looked at the headboard as a whole. Once they were all in place, I filled all of the holes, sanded everything down, and then I used Alex Flex on all of the seams. This adds a super finished and polished look to the headboard because there's no gaps in between those raised pieces of wood and the backer board. At this point, it's really all coming together, and the last step was primer, and then that feather down warm white color that we've added to a lot of the other parts of the build.
I can't believe what my eyes have seen. I just woke up from a broken dream.
And once that final color was on, you could see the whole thing come together. It was exactly how I wanted it to look. It adds so much to that bed area. And while we're on the topic of the bed area, that leads us to our next project, which was the closet doors. A few episodes back, you saw us build that entire closet space, right from the welded frame of the bed and the closet on the end to skinning it with ply, getting the shelves and the drawers and the lights in place. The final step for that closet was the sliding bypass closet doors. I measured the front of the closet and what size these doors would need to be. Because they're sliding bypass doors, one needs to be slightly larger than the other door just to fill the whole space with how the track is designed. But that bigger closet door can't be so big that it doesn't allow the drawer to open when both of the doors are on one side or the other. So a bit of a tricky design here, and you have to really make sure that everything is perfect. Otherwise you'll get those doors on, your drawers won't open, they'll be bumping into each other, it'll be a mess. So I took a lot of time to make sure that these were perfect. Once I got all the measurements in place, I cut the pieces of ply that will be the actual structure of the doors. I moved on to cut all of the slats out of a bunch of 1x3s. You will definitely recognize this door style from our other builds, and that's because we have not changed these closet doors throughout all of our builds. That's because we love these doors. I love having them right at the end of the bed. Some of the slats are horizontal and some are vertical, and it just adds so much to the space. You can tell that we love them because we haven't changed it at all. With all of the slats cut to uniform sizes, I use spacers to make sure that they are exactly the same width apart, and going down the line I use a lot of wood glue, and then I nail up from the back through the ply so that there's no nail holes in the front of the door. This is the most time-consuming part, is to just go through and make sure all of those slats are perfectly in place and lined up with one another. Actually constructing these doors is a really fun time-lapse to watch because they're all so evenly spaced and you can just watch them all go into place. The finishing step on these doors is to sand everything down to make sure it looks as good as possible, and then doing a few coats of water locks so that they match the other woods in the bus.
Oh Father, please come to my rescue. I was caught up in your landscape. Please tell me, now what am I supposed to do? I was caught up in your landscape. You don't know me the way that I know you. Tell me what you like.
In order to get the brackets in place, the wheels that will run along the track have to router a spot out on the back of the doors so it sets flush and you can screw them into the doors.
Every little bit of space counts in these builds, so if you route out a spot for the bracket and you don't just screw it right onto the door, it does save a little bit of space and you can get more out of your closet. Now it was time to bring the doors into the Unicell and just hang them simply up in place.
No problem at all.
No
Grab
problem.
them, put them in there, good to go. And we're done. There it is. Except the face is already on the cabinet. So they will not fit with the brackets on there. You cannot get them up in there. So as we've had to do in the past, we had to take the brackets off of the doors, put the doors in place in the closet, bring the brackets back, and then screw the brackets in from within the closet.
Once we did all of that, took the brackets off, put them back on, got the doors in place, made sure the smaller one was in front, the bigger one was in back, they finally were in place and we could slide them back and forth, and there were no problems there, thankfully.
So that time's gonna be. There be no more second chances.
So now with the headboard done, the closet doors at the end of the bed, the closet above the cabinet is all finished. Most of this bed area is good to go. The last project this week is one minor little thing that we're actually pretty excited about. That is the cubby that we built into the back of the closet. We made this little space because the way that the closet is constructed, it leaves a gap on both the left and the right side of the closet. Now, on the side facing the kitchen, that's great space to run all the wires for the outlets and the switches, but on the right side, it was just dead space. So we decided to add a tiny little cabinet in there. This little cubby is so small that we were really kind of struggling with what you would even store in it, although having it is better than not having it at all. We decided that the best plan of attack would be one of those bungee cubbies that you see in a lot of van builds, where instead of a closet door or shelves, you just add bungees to the front of it, and that's what holds things into the cabinet.
We decided to back this cubby with some felt just to give it a real finished look. And that way, whatever you put it in there, it's not going to get scraped by the wood from vibration of driving down the road. And mostly, it looks really nice. But any sort of outdoor thing here might be ideal.
This area can only be accessed when the back doors are open, because when those big barn doors are closed, it completely closes off that space and there's no room to really even reach around and get anything that you store in there. So we assumed there would be some sort of outdoor items that you could store in there, and because of that, we decided to back the cubby with felt. This was a little difficult to measure and cut and get into place, make sure it was perfect and that none of the corners were exposed. We just used a little spray adhesive and pressed the felt into place. That way anything you store in there can't rub on the wood and it gives it a little bit more finished look.
The last step on this cubby was inserting eye hooks back and forth on each side and then running a bungee back and forth all the way up. So now you have something to hold whatever you put in there in place. You might want to use disc golf discs. Maybe it's going to be a little camp shovel or something. Whatever it is, it's not going to go anywhere now because those bungees will hold it right in place.
Say no, I'm not like you, I don't think that you get it. You should go and get out, I'll make you regret it. Someone like you should worry about, maybe it's you who's upside down. And I'm not like you, I don't think that you get it.
We have a blanket that we bought when we were in Mexico, and we've had it in the Unicell as we've been building so that Mateo can lay on it. And I found that this cubby with the bungee was really convenient to just roll up a blanket and stick it through the bungees. And the cubby looks really cool when the barn doors are open and you have something like a blanket stored in there. It's really prominent when you're looking at the back of the build with those doors open. So I'm really glad that we added the bungees. It's a cool little feature. And when you pluck the bungees, you can play music on it.
You can. That's the most fun part. Each one has a different note.
It's like a bass.
Yeah. This real juicy zone right here. We got to tune it a little bit still. Overall, this cubby is just a fun, creative use of space. It's always good to use every inch you have available. Even if it's something small, it's definitely still worth it to have these little storage spots.
That does it for episode 17. A few really fun little projects this week that were mostly aesthetic, but also the closet doors really finishes off the closet. And then we ran the propane, which is another major system of the build, checked off the list.
Thank you guys for watching. We will be back next week with another video. Probably only another 5 or so of these. So stick around. It's getting really close. We are excited to take us over the finish line. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Right.